Welcome to M&G Agency Live, your go-to podcast for creativity, insights, and now a spotlight on the amazing businesses we work with.
This series is all about celebrating the people behind the brands, diving into their stories, achievements, and what makes them tick.
From the inspiring journeys to future plans, we'll be shining a light on the local businesses driving our community.
So, whether you're here for marketing tips, entrepreneurial insights, or just curious about what goes on in the world of business, you're in the right place.
Shall we get into it then?
Oh, heck yes. Welcome to episode 6 of M&G Agency Live, Meet the Client. This series, we're celebrating some of the truly incredible businesses and individuals that we've had the privilege to work with.
Yes, that's right. Joining us today is Graeme Kinghorn, the Chief Executive of Mental Health Aberdeen, a charity that has been transforming lives through mental health support across the northeast of Scotland for now 75 years.
Yes, today we'll hear about Graeme's personal story. We'll dive into the incredible work of Mental Health Aberdeen and explore some of the practical ways we can all prioritise our mental well-being. Graeme, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Hello.
And as well as Graeme, we're also joined by your account manager. It's our very own Isla from Mearns and Gill. Isla, welcome back to the podcast. I wonder, maybe just to kick us off, if you briefly want to share typically the kind of work that we do to support Mental Health Aberdeen.
Oh, okay, for sure. Well, hi. Thank you for having me back again. I'm very happy that Graeme is joining us on the call today. I have had the absolute delight of working with the team at MHA for maybe 6 or 7 years now. They are a brilliant client to work with. They have lots of their own great ideas, and they definitely love working with us as a partnership just to make really good things happen. It's obviously front and foremost, it's the important work that they do, and I guess a lot of it's about how we get that out there and how we make sure how we help to make sure they get the support we need. But I suppose, Graeme, what we've done, I guess in all honesty, the relationship started, I did a lot of it in my own time with some of the socials, and then Mearns and Gill got more and more involved, and then really as the charity grew and the services grew and it became bigger and bigger, our relationship became a bit more concrete, and now we've worked on you guys with everything from a rebrand to a campaign launch, social support, press,
events,
website, whatever we decide, whatever you decide, whatever ideas, we just help you. The shop, the graphics for the shop.
Sure.
Graeme, you are an idea machine, I would say that for sure. You've got a great team behind you that are the same, and I guess we just help bring these things to life for you.
Well, I do have this thing. I have had a career in business, and I hate the way that charities are sometimes perceived as not being businesses. There's always this down at heel type of approach, and that's not the way that I like to run the charity. So it's important that, image and branding and perception is important.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really competitive field that we work in as a local charity. So anything that we can do that helps to raise awareness primarily is good, and Image is important to a certain extent.
You've always said if something's worth doing, it's worth doing properly, albeit we have keep sharp pencils because you're third sector, but you definitely want to look professional and get your message out in the right way. That was what makes it great.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that happened when you joined. I do actually remember the first board meeting that you were there for. I have a 15-year history with MHA, and you turned up, and probably quite unusually for people who are new to the organisation, you were reasonably vocal in your first board meeting.
Oh,
which
Isla, surely not.
Which I really liked. And you're right, you probably work in quite a grey area because you do an awful lot of stuff for the charity yourself. But we do have this professional, normal relationship with Mearns and Gill, which has been great. So,
so important. Let's get back to basics. For any listeners who might not be familiar with MHA, Graeme, can you give us a quick overview of what the charity does and what makes it so important?
Yes. Is this my 30-second elevator pitch, or is this maybe a bit more?
Let's go with that.
We're a 75-year-old charity. We're in our 75th year this year. We're essentially a large counselling organisation.
Yeah.
The charity's had quite a few different iterations over its 75 years, but probably over the last 25 years, counselling has been what the charity has delivered primarily. and it's a modality of counselling which is known as person-centred counselling, which doesn't mean that the counsellor is there necessarily to give advice. The counsellor is there to empower the individual and essentially to listen. There's obviously a lot more to it than that. These services are delivered across 6 projects that we have, 5 of which are in Aberdeen and 1 is in Aberdeen. And we cover all age ranges. There's absolutely no barrier to access the services. Everything is delivered free at the point of delivery. And as well as that, we do an awful lot of awareness raising and signposting and training as well.
So it's really important work that you do. Now, 75 years, I've just been thinking about this. That's a very long time for a charity. But as far as mental health goes, things must have changed quite a lot because we perceive mental health and we talk about it so differently than we would have even, say, 20 years ago. How's it all changed?
Well, I wasn't here 75 years ago. We won't let any cats out of the bag. But I mean, I've had a 15-year involvement with the charity, and even in that time, public perception and I'm not going to say the understanding, but the awareness of mental health issues has, it's grown. It's gone completely off the charts. I mean, there's been an exponential explosion in people referencing mental health and mental health issues.
Even in the past 5 years, Graeme, I think it's probably changed, hasn't it? It's just completely different.
An awful lot has happened since, or as a result of, or an indirect consequence of the various lockdowns that we had during the pandemic. And that's probably more, or has been exacerbated more for younger people than it has been for adults. But my predecessor in this role was a lady called Astrid White, who had a 35-year career with the charity and was essentially responsible for setting up in the form that we work at the moment. Right at the start of lockdown, very prophetically, Astrid said, this is going to cause a huge amount of problems down the line. Yeah. And that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
And Isla, that's quite relevant to you personally, isn't it? Because we know in lockdown, you started your own podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, and Astrid and our Laura, who is now the head of counselling, they were my first guests on the podcast.
And it was very relevant to being in lockdown and kind of going through those times, wasn't it?
Yeah, and just loneliness and spending time alone. And sometimes the benefits of being alone, but for the most part, for sure, loneliness and the different forms it comes in, the different reasons.
Yeah. Great podcast. Me, Myself and Isla.
I know. I launched it just for the name.
We do love the name.
I love it.
So, Graeme, if we rewind a little bit as well here, let's talk about your journey. So what led you to your role as Chief Executive with MHA, and was working in mental health something that you always envisioned, or did it just happen naturally?
It certainly did happen naturally. Probably a bit of karma as well, to be honest. This is probably my third career.
Okay.
I did a number of things when I left school, and for a large part of my 20s, I was a fisherman.
Okay.
I'm from a wee place called Banff, which is about an hour from Aberdeen.
I did not know this.
Wow. There we go. So you were out on the trawler boats?
Yeah. My brother, James, who's my elder brother, he'd been at sea since he was 15, and it was his first boat, and it was an opportunity for me to do that. A lot of people that I went to school with in the villages and the towns round about were fishermen, and it was before the time when quotas were introduced into that industry, so it was quite a different experience to the one that it is now.
Yeah.
So I did that up into my late 20s. Then I decided that I would go to university to do the degree that I probably should have done when I left school. But there's a reason for that, and I'll come back to that. And I did a business studies degree at Robert Gordon's. I then spent 10 years in the building right next door to here when Anderson and Brown were there.
Okay.
And from there, I moved from private practice as a chartered accountant into industry. So I was the finance controller at the exhibition centre when it was at the Bridge of Dawn. And from there I moved into essentially 2 roles as a group finance director within the construction sector. So I was in similar roles for 15 years, which took me up to probably just before lockdown, literally just before lockdown.
Right.
But if I go back to when I was 18, my sort of first experience with mental health, and you have to set the scene, it was the it was the late 70s. It was the era of disco. I was an 18-year-old boy, but my mum attempted a suicide one Friday night, which I only discovered when I had come back from Aberdeen. I'd been I'd got up to go to Aberdeen very early. Getting on the bus and travelling to Aberdeen was a big thing.
Right.
And I came back from that trip, probably with a pair of jeans and whatever else I'd bought, and discovered that this had happened. And I had absolutely no concept of the fact that she had, she was anxious, or she'd been having issues. And it was all to do with a very, very small thing to do with her work, which was completely insignificant. But the way that she had, the way that it had manifested itself with her, and the impact that had had on her from stress moving into anxiety, and then into sort of hyper anxiety, to get to that point, it was probably something that I didn't really process personally until I was much older.
Yeah.
Because I was 18, and it was one of those things that just, you really don't know how to deal with it. You don't know what to do. So that probably really upset the plans that I had. Upset is completely the wrong word, but I didn't then go to university, which is why I did it later on.
Okay.
I just decided to get a job, and everything was really kind of up in the air. Because my dad died when I was really quite young, so he hadn't been around. I was 10 when my dad died.
Okay.
So it's probably something that I still work through, in terms of, I understand why she did it, but it's one of these things about a situation like that, which lots of people experience, in that it's, well, why? How did I not see the signs? Why did I not, why didn't I know? Why do people not necessarily talk about these things, rather than going from where they are to that, to that situation where they feel that the only way that they can get out of that situation is to take their lives by
take
suicide.
Real drastic action. Well, we're all very sorry to hear about this, but equally, thank you for opening up about it, because I think it provides a little bit of context. And back in the 70s, it was a different world as far as mental health goes, doesn't it? People weren't really talking about it, and we probably didn't have the awareness that we would have now.
No. Well, I mean, I think you kind of had to live then to understand what it was like.
Yeah.
And I go out and I talk to organisations and companies a lot. And I'm actually, we're out to a business who's very supportive of MHA, and we're doing some sessions with their staff this week. And one of the subjects that I'm covering is stigma.
Okay.
And it's incredibly interesting where these things come from and how they have changed through the years. But I mean, when I was 18 and that all happened, there were essentially mental, what they called lunatic asylums outside. Ladies Bridge was a great big building. Cornhill Hospital in Aberdeen at one point was in green fields round about Aberdeen. So it's the landscape was, nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was addressed or spoken about openly. Families wanted to just keep things very, very tightly. And going back years and years and years, people would just be essentially sent away to these hospitals. Yeah. Because there was no mechanism, there was no necessarily any understanding of mental illness, what caused it, what could be done to help people. But obviously, science and the science around mental health has progressed significantly, but probably much more so from the 50s and 60s onwards, as people began to realise not necessarily how the brain works, because that's one of the last probably big frontiers in terms of science, is that people still don't understand why things happen and exactly why, or is there a silver bullet for all these things? But there just isn't.
It sounds so bizarre when you even said the word lunatic asylum.
Yeah.
When you think people with mental health problems back in those days were almost isolated instead of, giving counselling and care and, having the resources that we have today.
Well, the word lunatic comes from the Roman for the moon, for luna, because at that time, when that word came into being, it was felt that, let's call it madness, which was termed at that time, went in cycles of the moon.
Okay.
But the term just stuck, basically.
Wow.
And language is an incredibly important thing when you're dealing with people. Pretty visceral and pretty raw was probably the approach to things in those days. So.
Well, I guess it's good that it's a different world that we live in now, isn't it?
Absolutely. So before joining MHA, were there any key moments that shaped your path getting to that point?
Apart from that time that I've just described Amy, I think that I've never had any predetermined idea of what I wanted to do. I seem to have a bit of a 7-year, not an itch, but I get bored after 7, 8 years, but things just happened, basically.
And you had been treasurer at MHA for a long time before you moved into the chief executive role, weren't you? So you knew the charity inside out.
Yeah.
Well, that was how I got involved. I didn't get involved because I'm a mental health professional. At the point that I was approached by Astrid's partner, who's sadly no longer with us, Sandy. I knew him through another organisation, and he asked if I would be interested in volunteering and helping them out. So it was my finance background that got me involved initially. Yeah. But as soon as I got there, I kind of felt that it felt right.
You were home.
This was me, and no pre-designed thoughts or I want to do it, and it just happened, basically.
So Graeme, that's quite interesting, your career. So it's been fisherman to finance to here we are, chief executive of MHA. What about outside work? What keeps you grounded? What hobbies? What do you like to do when you're not working?
I actually do the MHA role on a half, let's call it a half-time basis.
Okay.
I don't work in the organisation full-time, although
you probably do.
I probably do. There are lots of things that happen outside the 9 to 5 in the role with MHA, but I'm still involved in let's call it commerce or in business with various organisations that I support from a finance perspective. So what that does is it allows me to devote the time to MHA, and I like the mix that provides. But the other thing that I really like about that is that businesses have got a really significant role to play in providing the right environment and the right space for employees in terms of supporting their mental health. And that's an area that's really, really still it's in its infancy. Some organisations are very, very good at doing it. Some organisations are probably not so good. But a lot of that stems, I think, from concern about, what is the organisation's responsibility here?
Yeah.
Where are the lines in terms of what we should be doing? What our legal responsibility is, etc.
Some are scared. Some employees are a bit scared or wary.
Well, I think that we treat physical safety or physical health in a very different way that we treat mental health.
Yeah.
But actually, it's very difficult to unwind or to split the two.
Yeah, you can't really have one without the other.
Well, you can't, but the way that legislation, let's say in the Health and Safety Act, has been drafted up till now, is that it is quite grey about the area of mental health. And probably what hasn't happened is there hasn't been a financial penalty for businesses there's no known standard. If somebody, I had in the construction sector, if somebody is injured on a building site, there's a very clear path and a clear understanding of potentially what that will cost the business in terms of time, etc., and also money. That's much less clear in terms of mental health support and issues around about mental health that may be caused by an employer. There may be some input there. I'm not saying that all the mental health issues that are being talked about at the moment are to do with, your workplace. But because there is no defined, you cannot do that and you must do this, and this is the impact if you don't do that, I think employers tend to keep it further down the list of priorities.
Okay.
Because there's so many other things that, I've worked in business for more than 30 years, so I completely understand the drivers that there are just to keep businesses going and to make sure that, everything works, and all the regulations and the red tape that businesses have to jump through. This is just another one that being laid at the employer door at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's why I love going into the businesses and talking about this, because I have that experience.
Yeah.
And I can see it from both sides of the fence.
Okay.
So is that what you do in your spare time, Graeme?
Oh, sorry.
Sounds like
Sorry.
So, your mental health to the core.
I was just trying to explain that I don't do the role all the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Although probably I do. Also probably I do.
You clearly live and breathe it.
Yeah.
What do I like doing? I like doing a bit of walking. I like have a wee doggy, and Mrs. Kinghorn, of course. So we've got a house that we're probably about halfway through finishing properly. So it's that kind of normal stuff.
busy life.
Okay.
So, yeah. So MHA has been providing vital support in the Northeast for over 7 decades, which is amazing. What would you say has been the charity's most significant achievements or milestones during your tenure?
Probably just surviving over that period, to be honest. I mean, any organisation that can survive for 75 years,
Yeah.
I think the average length of businesses is probably less than 10.
Yeah.
If you look at that between startups, etc., it probably feels a little bit for me having the stewardship of the organisation. It's about it's a little bit like that analogy about walking across the polished floor with the Ming vase, which was referenced a lot in the lead up to the latest election, where you probably I spend more time being concerned about getting things right.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we've expanded the whole visibility and hopefully raised awareness. And there's always an awful lot more you can do, because you speak to people and something, what do you do? Are you mental health? Never heard of them.
Yeah, I know.
And you go, what do you mean you've never heard of them?
I was shouting from the rooftop.
We spend so much effort on telling people about us. So apart from that, it is probably about trying, or what I've done in the short time that I've been the chief executive, which is just about 4 years now. We've moved to a new building. We have...
I was going to jump in quite soon and say, you're not selling this. You have done so much.
That's why Isla is here today.
Yeah,
But he's getting to it, so I shouldn't have said it. You're getting to it, Graeme.
It's anything I can do to bring the charity to people's... so that people know, because all the services people can self-refer. So all they have to do is to pick up the phone.
Okay.
You don't have to go to your GP. You don't have to whatever. So the more awareness we can put out there, the better.
Yeah.
There is a resource limitation that we have, as like any organisation has. But that's probably the one that I'm not going to say proud of, but I think it has had most impact for me, because it means that the charity will never have to move again.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of a hub there, because there are 2 other local third sector organisations that rent space from us. We've got another one that is about to join us, and we are so our building's just above the Burger King in Union Street, across from the music hall. It's a useful point of reference for everyone.
Everyone knows where Burger King is.
Yeah. So the shops underneath, which we own the building.
Yeah.
And the shops underneath we have also been purchased, and we are about to expand our charity element into that space at the moment, which will just it helps to spread funding is always an issue for charities. So in terms of spreading the income streams that we have, we've got 2 charity shops now. These things are really, really valuable in terms of making us less reliant on what we call statutory funding. So sort of core funding that we get. But the core funding is, for all sorts of reasons, it's just probably never enough. So I just like to bring a little bit of much more of a commercial aspect of what we do. And that's just about, I'll do anything to raise money.
Yeah.
Literally. Well, not...
And that's been recorded?
We have that on tape.
Not anything. But, within reason, it's about, you have to try and push the boundaries a wee bit and go into areas that you haven't done before.
That's what you have been really good at. I honestly wasn't sure how anyone would ever match the energy of Astrid, who, as you've already said, was there for 30 odd years and did everything bar the plumbing, or she maybe even did the plumbing. But you absolutely matched the energy of Astrid, and then you built on it, and you took MHA to offices that actually took mental health counselling and mental health out of the dark ages. And they were really, no offence to the building, but they were really downtrodden offices. They weren't really fit for purpose anymore. They were doing incredible work in there. But now the hub that we have is a reflection of how important mental health is now. And it's right in the centre of the city, and it's amazing. You are taking great steps, I think, to future-proof the charity, and with the charity shops and with some of the other projects that we're running. So you have done amazing things to be proud of, and the team.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's in theory, it's part of the job that I do.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, to be perfect. And I felt that I was making a difference.
Yeah.
But the thing that I do like about the Union Street is because it brings the whole conversation about mental health into the mainstream.
Yeah.
And I just hate, well, it's up a back street, and that's, let's not talk about it.
Yeah, like it's hidden away where you're absolutely not, when you don't need to be there.
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier about stigma. So we know that the stigma is a huge barrier when it comes to mental health. How do you think MHA is tackling this issue and encouraging open conversations? You've just said, you're based right there in the city centre on Union Street. What other steps have you taken?
I think a lot of the messaging that we do, Pete, is round about trying to normalise mental health. And personally, the explosion in workplace absence, let's take that as an example, that we've seen since COVID effectively, where it now accounts for 50% of all workplace absence. I think the figures are something like about 900,000 people a year cite mental health issues as being the reason why they can't turn up for work. And I think there's been an over-medicalisation of the mental health word. And as a result, it's kind of debased what mental health actually is. So there's a line which is about, life and the stresses of life. Mm-hmm. And everybody deals with everything differently. Mm-hmm. But if you treat everything as being a mental health issue, it means that people who have significant mental health issues, there's no distinction. Mm-hmm. And I think that's wrong. I think that it's probably something that's come. It's, the messaging around mental health and raising awareness has been great. But I think there is an element of personal responsibility that kind of gets forgotten in a lot of these things, where people do have to take responsibility for the fact that things aren't always, you're not living your best social media life all the time.
Yeah, life is hard.
Yeah. Life is hard, and it has a habit of hitting you and then hitting you again when you're down. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean to say that is necessarily a mental health issue. Mm-hmm. For me, mental health issues are where things like that, because people don't realise that the benefit of actually building in structures and building in mechanisms and building in routines to give themselves the time to process things, to think about things. None of us can think, as quickly as a computer can, or the algorithm that throws things back at us. So, brains just we haven't evolved that far to actually deal with that. So it's really important that individuals realise that, and they do take time away from technology and other things and just try to rationalise and exercise, get fresh air. None of the things that help your mental health in the long term are difficult, and none of them cost any money. But it's important that people realise that, and they set aside time to do it, and they do it regularly. And if they do that, then they've got they have a very good chance of being able to cope much better with the ups and downs of normal life.
Mm-hmm. So okay. True. Thanks for that then, Graeme. Can you share any stories, without obviously naming any names, that shows the real difference that MHA has made in someone's life?
Well, our social media, our stuff, it's stuffed full of comments.
Mm-hmm. So many testimonials.
That have to be anonymised, obviously, for client confidentiality, which is another thing that keeps me awake at night. Mm. And any sort of breaches that would make that an issue. There is one individual that I haven't spoken to for a wee while. He's a guy, and his background was less than perfect. He had done all sorts of other forms of support, but he came to us for counselling probably about 3 years ago, and I didn't know this until he was doing some fundraising stuff for us, and I then got to know him through that aspect. Because I don't know who people are counselling. You know, the actual structures that we've got in place to protect client confidentiality are very, very strict.
Right.
But people sometimes then put their heads above the parapet and say, well, you know, I've done this and you helped me in this and this. Anyway, I started talking to this guy, and it was incredible just to hear the realisation that he had taken from the counselling, where it had literally, I'm not saying this tritely, but it had changed his life. It had put him in a place where he could actually deal with situations that had been dogging him for, he wasn't an old guy, he was probably in his early 40s, but a lot of his life had been blighted by just the roll-up of the situations that had followed things that had happened early in his life. So, for him it was transformational, but that's the thing. For a lot of people it is, because as long as you accept that things aren't linear and they go on this up and down, then that's really, really important. So
I can imagine this is so rewarding for you. You shared that story earlier on about your own mother, and just to be able to see the difference that MHA are making in people's lives, that must be quite incredible.
Yes, you probably don't spend too much time thinking about that because you're probably more focused on the day job, to be honest, Pete. But I realised when I changed career from being a full-time finance person that there was something that was lacking, and something that I wasn't getting just from the pursuit of, let's say, of profit as an end goal. Yeah. So it's I'm lucky to be in the position that I am. I feel really privileged, to be honest, but there's a lot to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, look, let's take a look at some practical tips, and Isla, maybe you can also help here. So we know mental health is such a big topic. So for any listeners who might feel overwhelmed, what are some simple practical steps that they can take to support their own mental well-being? You've touched on walking and things like that. Any little exercises that you think could support someone?
Will I start?
Yeah.
So things I actively use when I'm struggling. Well, first of all, I went to MHA for counselling. I've been twice. I'm not worried to say that. So I can tell talking to someone about whatever's on your mind is honestly one of the most important things you can do. If you feel like you need to do that, absolutely. It's not easy to make the call or to talk to someone, but absolutely talking to someone helps.
Yeah.
But I think everybody should have a counsellor.
Agree. I totally agree. My mum brought me up to think like that. I'm so lucky.
Everybody needs somebody that they can talk to.
Absolutely.
In a non-judgmental space.
Yes. It doesn't know you.
So that's very, very difficult in any relationship. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the benefit of that for individuals is really, really important.
I totally agree. But obviously not everyone can get access to that. Yeah. We can't help everyone with that. But counselling, let's get that out there. I find breathing, so I'm prone to some mad anxiety sometimes. I do breathing techniques. I do something called square breathing, which SAS do, I think, when they're out on projects.
You've mentioned this before. Talk us through it. So is this a moment where you might be at your desk and maybe you're overthinking and suddenly you're getting
I am always overthinking.
High anxiety.
But it takes a bit of practice and it takes a little while. But if you breathe in to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4. That eventually regulates your nervous system. And even though you can still be scared, you can still be panicked, you're telling your body that you're safe and you're fine. And that honestly does work. I went for an operation a couple of years ago and I sat doing that beforehand. I'd have rather been anywhere else in the world. But that definitely helped me.
Because it takes your mind off all these other thoughts and you're focusing on your breathing, I guess.
Yeah, and you're physically changing what's going on in your body with the breath as well. So that for me, and running, I love a run.
Yeah, I think I saw on social media that you guys had done quite recently a breathing clinic.
Oh, yeah.
You'd had somebody in to actually do that.
So a girl who used to work with us called Elaine, she's brilliant. She's now got her own yoga therapy practice. She came in December and just gave us an hour-long session on different breathing techniques to try. If I remember rightly, Pete was on the floor at one point.
I was on the floor, fully embracing it. But we all finished that session feeling really relaxed. We work in a agency's quite fast-paced, high pressure at times, and it was just a great hour out to kind of to do that, and we all felt very refreshed after it.
Yeah.
So from a kind of business or individuals that are wanting to get involved in supporting mental health, what advice would you give to them?
This is one of the things that we probably find quite difficult in our organisation, because you can't necessarily just come into the building.
Yeah.
Because we have clients that are coming and going.
Yeah.
And that element of confidentiality. There's always a way from a fundraising perspective to support us as an organisation. I think it's about realising that that there is a value to doing this, because the outcomes from putting a little bit of time and probably some money aside to show that, that the businesses actually care is the wrong word. I'm not saying that businesses don't care, but it is just about taking a little bit of time out of what is, for everybody, a busy daily schedule.
And if you look at the stats, and I don't have them in front of me, so I shouldn't have mentioned stats, but like in the amount of days that are lost per year because of people struggling with their mental health, even if you're an employer that looks at things only in terms of money and bottom line and things, it's worth investing in your staff to make sure that you are looking after them so that they can come in and do the best possible job for you, even if that's the only thing you're looking at. And there's obviously way more to it than that.
Well, it probably depends. I mean, I know the figures because it's stuff that I look at.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, mental health accounts for almost half of all workplace-related absences. And I think 22-23, the figures were something like over 20 billion was lost to GDP through people being off, and half of that related to mental health. So there is a cost for not actually taking some time to actually, and if you think about it in terms of small businesses or smaller businesses where you have one person doing a job and they're off, but then the disruption that causes round about it is really, really significant.
Yeah.
If the absence is related to mental health or something similar. So
what I would say that you guys do is quite good is as a way of starting off supporting companies, because I feel like our message for this year is all about what can MH do to help you and your employees, and then how in turn can you help MHA back in our 75th anniversary year. But where you guys have good success is in the first instance heading out to companies and doing like initial lunch and learns or taster sessions, just doing presentations to teams of people, giving them some helpful information, and sometimes your relationship grows with clients from there, doesn't it?
Well, I think once you actually sit down and talk to people, it's what we do on a day-to-day basis. So it's, people are willing to engage. And you mentioned earlier that, companies might be scared. And there is an element of that. I'm a member of the Mental Health and Energy Task Force, which was set up about a year and a half ago, specifically to look at mental health in the energy sector. But it was really started because of there was a publication of some statistics that looked at offshore rotational workers and how much more prevalent significant mental health illness was if you were in that sort of role. And it's had an awful lot of success to date in terms of raising awareness. Probably the biggest issue is that engagement has to come from the very top of the organisation. And I'm sure I'm not saying anything out of line here. That is what is actually being experienced as we go and talk to organisations or colleagues that I've got within that task force do that. There are a lot of people who want to talk about mental health, but it's much harder to try and push something up to, the top of the organisation than it is for something to come right down through the organisation. So, but it's just an ongoing conversation. There is the feeling that I got when I joined that task force for a start was that it's stuffed full of people who are, it's engineers. We solve problems. We do this. We always find a way of doing things. We build these fantastic structures out there with all this technology, et cetera, and that there's a similar solution to mental health, but there isn't.
Yeah. You need to think differently, don't you?
And I think that's quite a difficult, it's a process to actually get there.
Yeah.
It's a very individual, it's individual to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, there are an awful lot of things that people can do if they're serious about actually looking after their mental health that are cheap. It can be anything. I mean, it can be, meeting Isla for a coffee, which I do occasionally.
I love that. I look forward to them. And actually, on the back of that, what we're doing here at Mearns and Gill, this sounds like a shameless plug, but I'm not, is on the back of some of the things we've been learning, is we now do a monthly health and well-being lunch and learn for the team. And like we've already mentioned, we've had breathing techniques, we've had financial advice, we have had physical and diet advice. Every month we try and get together for 1 hour and just try and learn something else. The point of it is that the team can take tiny little bits away that they may or may not use to try and improve their well-being a little bit going forward. And we're doing that on no budget. It's easy. You can do.
And we find it really interesting. We all get a lot out of that.
Yeah.
Okay, look, some great points so far. And we're about to move on to the next segment of the podcast. This is a segment that Aimee doesn't really enjoy.
No, I think that's very unfair.
It's called Inspiration Corner.
I think that's very unfair. I don't really appreciate the voice. I love the segment. Thank you. I get reeled for this every single time.
So it's time, Graeme, for you to shimmy into Inspiration Corner. Now that you're in the corner, this is where we ask our guests to share an inspirational quote, something that's stuck with you, maybe something you think will help others.
Okay. When we talked about this before, just before we did the podcast, my mind keeps going back to, what do you want to be when you grow up?
All right.
And do you want to be a pop star, or do you want to be or do you want to be an actor, or do you want to be a footballer? Mm-hmm. But the older I've got, I thought if I could be anybody, I would be the Dalai Lama.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Good
vibes. However, I'm not going to choose because he's pretty sorted.
Right.
So somebody that I've been reading about quite recently is Ernest Hemingway, who was an American journalist, author, and this guy he really did live a life. He fought in the Spanish Civil War. He was incredible. One of his quotes is, "When people talk, listen completely. Don't be thinking what you're going to say. Most people never listen."
Oh, that's such a good one.
Yeah, and we're all quite guilty of that sometimes when you're in a conversation, because sometimes it might be a little bit you're nervous and you're waiting to speak, but really listening.
Well, it's about being present in the conversation, but not necessarily listening.
Yeah.
And that really resonates because of what we do as an organisation.
Of course.
It is primarily, although it's a talking therapy, it's about the client talking.
Yeah.
It's about the counsellor listening and helping the client to talk. So listening is a very undervalued skill, I think.
And a very good quote to share. So thank you for bringing that into, I'm going to do it again, Inspiration Corner.
I can see why Aimee cringes.
Right, we're going to move along.
The table here.
We're getting through this podcast. We're almost out of time. We are going to move along to next feature that is a little bit of fun. We're going to throw some quick fire questions at you, Graeme, and no pressure at all. Nope. Aimee, you can start.
Yep. Okay. Meditation retreat or an adventure holiday?
Meditation retreat.
Always laugh uncontrollably or never laugh again?
It would have to be always laugh uncontrollably.
Okay, good answer.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Right answer. There's a lot of dog people in this room.
Betty,
dogs.
Very important one now, Graeme. Pineapple on a pizza, yes or no?
Absolutely yes.
I'm on board with that.
No.
I am on board with that.
Early mornings or late nights?
Early mornings.
Yoga or a HIIT workout?
Yoga.
Run a marathon or hike up a mountain?
I have run one marathon before.
I was going to say, you could do both.
A long time ago. I'd probably hike up a mountain, yeah.
Good answer. Be stuck on a roller coaster for an hour or stuck in a lift for an hour?
Lift for an hour.
Always be 10 minutes late or always be 20 minutes early?
20 minutes early.
Oh, I like that.
I mean, in my mind,
am.
There's some answers to some of these questions that if people, for example, give you the answer, never laugh again. Who are they?
Yeah, I know. I was
and also, Who would rather be stuck on a roller coaster for an hour?
would.
Then I don't like
You might get
spaces.
Upside down.
You might get good views.
No.
You never know.
I've
Anyway,
got shivers just thinking about that.
thank you for humouring us with this or that. Graeme, that is us almost at the end of this episode. I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us, and to you as well, Isla. Graeme, thank you for sharing your journey and the amazing work of MHA. It's been inspiring to hear how the charity is making such a positive impact. For anyone listening who'd like to learn more about the charity, where can they find you?
Well, we're all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, our website, or in the phone book as well.
All the places.
We're there. Mental Health Aberdeen. There is no other Mental Health Aberdeen.
No.
We always have been a local charity, and we always will be a local
So
charity.
you can just search that and find out more information.
Yeah.
So, as always, if you'd like to find out more about what we've discussed, you can drop us a line. You can find us on Instagram at Mearnsgill, and you can also find Mearns and Gill on Facebook, LinkedIn, or online.
Absolutely. You can also text us directly from your podcast platform. We'd like that. We'd like a little text. We can answer that. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. On the next episode, we'll be chatting to Johnson Carmichael, but that is next time. And for anyone listening, why not take a moment to yourself today, whether it's a walk, a deep breath, or just sitting quietly for a few minutes. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Thank you.